come in and join us at the last minute due to their sadness in the life of Mamie Gasparis. Anyway, it is wonderful to have you here, and I have become acquainted with Scott, and I think highly of him. Scott, it's your baby.
Thank you. As was just mentioned, I was brought in at the last minute on this, but I also will let you know that just last month I presented on the exact same topic at the Mid-Atlantic Association of Museums. So I am well versed on the topic, and I'm ready to take you forward into accreditation. So, accreditation, excellence in every museum. And the first question you come up to in this is, yes, it's excellence in every museum, but is it worth it? I'll tell you right now, and I'll tell you throughout the presentation today, yes, it is worth it for many reasons, and we will hit on many of those reasons, and probably even more as we go on throughout this entire 2-day workshops. So I want to start off today with some definitions, just so when I say what standards are, you know what I mean by standards. Standards are generally accepted level of performance. They usually talk about the big picture, qualitative ideas, and they're almost always outcomes oriented. Best practice, generally accepted actions and philosophies. They demonstrate awareness of. I mean, you know what you're talking about. I know what I'm talking about. Solve problems. Well, it's not as simple as your 2 + 2 = 4 problem, but that's a good place to start. And what I feel is the most important part about best practice is it can be replicated or emulated. If it cannot be replicated or emulated, it is not a best practice. It's that simple. And then the topic of today, accreditation. What is accreditation? And I have to say, I'm very lucky to get to go right after Charles Bryan. Not because we talked in advance to make sure we both have the same nice yellow ties and blue pinstripe shirts on. But because when he was talking about the museums, he spoke about, think of yourself as an educational institution. And then it made me think right away of my definition of accreditation that I have up here. And the act of granting credit or recognition to an educational institution that maintains suitable standards. Now, you can debate that a little bit and say, well, don't corporations get accredited? I mean, there's ISO 9002, 9007 accreditations, but it's also an educational standard. It's a standard that tells the corporation that its employees know enough knowledge to talk at this level, to know what they're talking about, to know what they're working with. So everybody, in one sense or another, is an educational institution. We, as museums, house museums, historic properties, collection holders, we have so much more. We're so close to being an educational institution. And in many ways, we are, as Dr. Bryan said this morning, we are an educational institution in the purest of senses. We are the classroom, we are the campus. So you got some questions here. Who, what, when, why? These are the questions that I hope to answer today. I put some answers out there. I put them in jumbled mess so you would have the understanding that none of this comes to you straightforward. You have to figure out how it all works together. All the questions are important. You have to answer them one at a time. You have to make sure that when you go through answering your questions, they answer them in the right way. Right? As we look at this, who? In the middle, are we talking about me or are we talking about you? Are we talking about, down in the bottom right, Wilton House, or Webb Dean Stevens House, or Octagon House, or Dumbarton House, or any of the other properties owned by NSCDA and the state corporate societies? What? Well, accreditation. What kind of accreditation? Are we talking about AAM accreditation, American Alliance of Museums? Or are we talking about the ASLH accreditation, which is the American Association of State and Local History Organizations? Or how about the NSCDA accreditation? We all should be familiar at some level on that type of accreditation. When? Are we talking about yesterday, today, tomorrow, 5 years down the road, or 10 years down the road? Well, it all depends on where you are at this moment, where you hope to strive to succeed to get to. Are you already accredited? Well, then you're looking at, when does the next accreditation come up? What do we have to fulfill and accomplish before that next accreditation? And why? Well, some of the whys are out there. You got credibility. Accreditation gives you credibility. And we're going to go into more depth with all of this. But it gives you recognition, accountability, and the one on the top, which I made in bold black so everybody would see it, money. Accreditation always helps with money. So why don't we go forward and just try and answer some of these questions. Why accreditation, or what is the benefit of doing this? What is the benefit of becoming an accredited institution? I broke it down here as two different parts. You have the credibility and accountability, which I like to say it's when you're looking out. And then you have the clear sense of purpose. It's when you're looking in or within. So starting on credibility, we have national recognition. National recognition of your museum's commitment to excellence and highest professional standards of museum operations and public service. That is what you get out of becoming accredited. You get that great recognition. You get a positive public image and validation of your museum's work and accomplishments. You get increased credibility with funding agencies and your donors. And you also have your stakeholders look at you in a different way. They look at you as you're one that they hope to aspire to. They trust you. If you want to borrow an object from their collection, they're more willing to loan it to you. So it's that confidence amongst your stakeholders. Then, I have to say, I love Pepe Le Pew. He always has a clear sense of purpose, Here, you see his heart pounding out. You know what he's there for. He's there for love. His focus, his drive is there. That is the focus and drive that we need. So what does it do for us when we look within? It allows us to get understanding of the museum's strengths and goals, its priorities, and its mission. And it also gives us an opportunity for our staff and board to be thoughtful about their practices. Are we doing things right? Are we doing things the best possible way? And yes, there's more. You get leverage and support. And what I mean is you get these tools to lobby. And you get to lobby your local and state governments because you have this accreditation saying that you are doing things right. And again, it doesn't matter if it is, well, it does matter. But we'll start by saying it doesn't until we go a little further on here. If it is accreditation through the NSCDA, or through AASLH, or through the AAM, or many other organizations out there. If you're a children's museum, they have their own accreditation program. If you're a railroad museum, they have their own. gardens, zoos. Everybody has their own organization that accredits them. So if you want to be accredited both for your house and for your gardens, you can do it through 2 different, 3 different, 4 different organizations out there. And they are seen by your peers as the leaders. The leaders say you are doing it right. You're doing it correct. You are looking forward in what you do. It also allows you, like I said earlier, the loans and traveling exhibitions. By being an accredited organization, it means that you hold a certain level of trust. You're committed to take care of your collections in a certain manner. You attract support. By this, you're able to maintain accreditation and use it as a leveraging tool. That support could be from funders. It could be from your local community and awards. It could be from people who are scholars out there and want to learn more and do research, and now they know that not only do you have the material in your collection, but you research it in a scholarly manner. That's what some of the things that accreditation can give you. Under sustainability and a stronger institution, it fosters sustained organizational development and improvement. You, being the board, become a governing authority, better educated about museums, standards. So, by being accredited, it says you as a board understand what the standards are for governing and the right way to govern. And it allows you to be viewed in a better aspect when it comes to all those costs, those things that, insurance. You go out there and you're accredited, it puts you at a better risk level with your art insurance. That's a bonus. Now we have this list. Over the next several slides, these are the main points that I want to convey to you. Make sure that you understand that accreditation has a public trust and accountability to it. It's about your mission and your planning. It's about leadership and organizational structure, your collection stewardship, your collections management policy, your educational programs, and to make sure that you're interpreting your house, your museum, according to what your mission says. Financial stability. You don't only look at how much money you spent yesterday and how much you plan on spending today, but you have a budget in place to say how much you're going to spend tomorrow and the day after and a week and a month after that. And you know where the funding's coming in as well as where it's going out. And then finally, accreditation talks and works with your facilities and your risk management system in place. Now for each of these topics, I have another slide coming up to you here. Starting off with the first one, public trust and accountability. A museum is a good steward, and its resources held are in public trust. You have to realize that. It identifies the communities it serves and makes appropriate decisions in how it serves them. You become a good, inclusive neighbor. By this is something you strive for. It doesn't just happen naturally, you work at it. But becoming a good, inclusive neighbor helps with that whole accreditation process. It allows your neighbors to know that you are a legitimate house and a legitimate museum and a legitimate institution that is out there to educate and benefit and do good in that community. Education in public service. Well, I just briefly mentioned on that with the community. But your role is a public service role. It is to educate. It is to bring the way that NSCBA is designed. It's to bring history alive, to bring history to its constituents. you have to decide who your constituents are, but it's to reach out and grab them and get them interested in what you have to share with them. Commitment to public accountability and have a transparent mission. Well, these go hand in hand, because if you don't have a transparent mission, well, how can you be committed to public accountability? How can they hold you accountable? They can't. And part of being a 501c3 is being publicly held accountable for your actions. And that's why it's so important to have a transparent mission, to have a mission that is meaningful, that actually is what you do and who you are. A mission is more than just a set of 8 to 85 words on a piece of paper. It actually tells you the entire reason that you exist. And you have to make sure that, a little bit further on, we're going to talk about a core documents program through AAM. The number one core document on the list is a mission statement. You need to make sure you know why you exist before you can go out and tell others why you exist. And the last thing under public trust and accountability is you comply with the laws. This is your local, state, federal. It doesn't have to be a, quote, law as you think of in the legal sense. It could be the guidelines of an organization. The guidelines, you comply with the guidelines of the NSCDA. You comply with the guidelines of AAM, AASLH, AAMD, or any of the other organizations out there that works with museums. Mission and planning. A museum who has a clear understanding of its mission is able to communicate this out while it exists, and it helps to benefit because they can say to the public who they are. I tried to emphasize that a little bit in the earlier slide. It is the utmost importance to understand what your mission is and be able to present it to the public. What do these 185 words on a piece of paper mean? What do they say? What do they tell me about my organization? And what do they allow me to tell you and everybody else about my organization? All aspects of museum operations should be integrated and focused on that mission. If you're not focused on your mission, you're out there floating in the ocean. If you remember the Tom Hanks movie that he was stranded on the island and he had the volleyball that he named Wilson. You don't want to be Tom Hanks and Wilson. You don't want to be out there just floating, hoping somebody will find you one day. You're not Wilson. You're the NSCDA. Remember that. Think strategically. This is not just your governing authority, but it's also your staff. As Dr. Bryan said earlier, it is of utmost importance that there is a clear line of communication between the staff and the governing authority, that there's no wall up between them, that they work together and cohesively. It is so important because by working together and cohesively, not only do you accomplish your task, but you accomplish your tasks faster and often better. Institutional planning. Now, institutional planning involves all your audiences, not just what you're going to do internally, but externally. You know, it's one of those things, I know, in organizations that I'm in, it's very odd. I turned 40 the other year, and I'm starting to get all these letters about making sure I put them in my will. And it's really odd to me because I don't plan on dying anytime soon. But on the other side, it is institutional planning. It is that reaching out to the public. It is just one of many aspects of institutional planning. Where's that funding going to come next year, 5 years, 10 years down the road? What are you going to accomplish? Your strategic plan next year, 5 years, 10 years down the road. And it also goes beyond the strategic planning, your funding. It hits all aspects, your facilities, your grounds, your educational programs. You have to think of it cohesively and all of it. And then under mission and planning, your measures of success. Now, Dr. Bryan mentioned earlier about strategic plan. He asked how many of you have a strategic plan. I say a lot of hands went up. Well, your strategic plan often is that starting point for your measures of success. It tells you what you want to accomplish. Make sure you measure that and that you'll accomplish it. Because as you have it out there, it is part of your planning. It helps you tell a future. It helps you get to a future. It helps you become better. And honestly, that's what accreditation is all about. Leadership and organizational structure. We're making our way down that list. The governance, staff, and volunteer structures are what we're talking about, the advancement of the museum's mission with your governance, with your staff, with your volunteers. And once you have it in all of them, it's with your community, with your constituents, with the greater world at large. So you must advance the museum's mission. Second, we have a clear and shared understanding. This, again, I love that I went after Dr. Bryan. He hit on so many of these points throughout his first and second discussion. But your clear and shared understanding has to be legally, ethically, and effectively. You have to be able to carry out your responsibilities, your duties. And you is the big picture. It is your governing body, your staff, your volunteers. And you have to make sure everybody who you count within your organization does it legally, ethically, and effectively. Because if you don't, you're throwing money to the wind. It just slows down your processes. It makes it that much more difficult to advance and to meet your goals and to, as Karen likes to say, check off the next thing on a strategic plan. Composition, qualifications, and diversity. I have this because you really, whenever you have the opportunity, should have this within your museum's leadership, staff, and volunteers, because everybody carries something different with them. And I think that's very important to realize and remember. And I know that's something that at Dumbarton House, we know, we see it amongst our board. We saw a discussion here earlier when diversity and the way America's population is changing, and 30 years from now, white will be minority. Those are things that you really have to focus on and consider when you look at your leadership and your organizational structure. And then finally down here, I have a clear and formal division of responsibilities. This is between the governing authority and any group that supports the museum, whether it's separately incorporated or operating within the museum or as parent organizations. So as you're looking at this, clear and formal division of responsibilities is not just your governing body and your staff. It's also everybody else who's involved with you. If it is the local government, if it is someone who gave you a grant, make sure they know what their responsibilities are and you know what your responsibilities are on accomplishing the needs that are outlined within the grant funding. And you have to look at this as a holistic process. Collection stewardship. Well, I don't know if you know, but this is my favorite one. According to your mission statement, you must have an appropriate collection. If your mission says that you are telling the period of the Civil War in Virginia, it does you no good to have 85 Revolutionary War rifles in your collection. You might be able to use some of them to do an exhibition on how, military rifles have advanced from the beginning of America to when America decided to fight against itself. But in all realistic aspects, make sure your collection meets your mission. That's having your appropriate collection. The museum legally, ethically, and effectively manages, documents, cares for, and uses the collection. It really does you no good to have something sitting for 30, 40, 50 years in storage because, well, now I'll put it this way. My great-great-grandmother gave it to the museum. So I feel there's an important commitment to hold on to it. Does it meet the collection's mission, the museum's mission? If it does, use it. Don't just let it sit there in storage. Put up a temporary exhibit with it. Scholarly standards. Accreditation says that you know what real scholarship is. You know how to document your resources. And you know how to open up your collection for others to be able to research it and use you as documentation. Strategically plan for a collection's future. Again, I don't want to brag or continually use Dumbarton House as an example, but we just got a storage area designed and built out. And we just, October 23rd, moved our collections into that new storage facility. We're strategically planning for the future of the collection. We're reaching out to different funders, the NEH, IMLS, to help us advance our mission. And again, advancing your mission goes back to being accredited. Being accredited goes back to having credibility within your community, amongst your colleagues, in the greater world, those who do not know you. Education and interpretation. Have clear goals, philosophies, and messages in your education and in your interpretation. They work hand in hand, but they are two separate things. Please remember that. Audience-focused interpretation. Remember what Dr. Bryan said? It's not object-focused anymore that people come for. They are the audience. Make sure you're reaching out to them on what they want and they need. Research based upon scholarly standards. Well, under collections, we talked about what scholarly standards are. Make sure you do your research in your collection, in your material culture, to meet those same standards. Techniques, technology, and methods accurate and appropriate to its goals, contents, audiences, and resources. A lot of big words there. But make sure you do things and do them right. Dr. Bryan talked about he went into a museum early in his talk, pointing out a flaw in the introduction panel. 2 years later, it still was wrong or incorrect. If you do it accurate and appropriate, you don't have that issue. Consistent, high-quality activities. You can do a lot of activities, but if you don't do them well, they're almost worthless. You can have 500 programs in a year at your museum, but if you only get one person showing up to each of those, I would much rather have 10 programs that get 50 people showing up, because it's a lot less work. So make sure you do it with high quality and you do it right. Assessment of effectiveness. You can look at yourself and say, I'm being effective. But if someone else can look at you and say, wow, I wish I could be like Marcy. I wish I could be like Julie. That makes a difference. So make sure it's assessed by an outside authority. We're moving on to financial stability. The museum legally, oh, here comes those terms again, legally, ethically, and responsibly acquires, manages, and allocates its funding resources in a way that advances its mission. This is all mission-oriented. If you haven't caught on to that yet, I'm telling you now, it's mission-oriented. You have to be fiscally responsible for long-term sustainability. Know what you're doing today and tomorrow, but also know what you're doing next year, 5 years, and 10 years down the road. Facilities and risk management. You know, I can go down through all of these, but it's very simple. Have an operations manual, have an emergency plan. If you have an operations manual in place and you utilize it, you have your facilities covered. Risk management, if you have an emergency plan in place and everybody knows where it is, what it says, you have your risks covered. Oh, that's a shame. One of two images on all of my slides, and you can't see this one well. As I said earlier on that who, what, when, why, we had 3 different types of accreditation up there. One of them was AAM. AAM, the American Alliance of Museums. They have this chart, which is called Continuum of Excellence. And you start with, now of course, this is for AAM. You start off by becoming a member of AAM. But you don't have to look at it just as an AAM program. You can do this internally within yourself. Then you have a Pledge of Excellence. Sign your name. Commit yourself that you're going to do things right. You're going to pledge that I am going to do this in the best possible manner. AAM has the map, that little shelf there is Museum Assessment Program. Assess yourself. Have someone else come in and assess you. The MAP program is something, once you become a member of AAM, you can get funding for the MAP program. We had a MAP program accomplished the other year at Dumbarton House. It really helps guide us on where we're going for the next 5 years. Core documents. There's a set of 5 core documents you need to know. I'll hit on them at the very end here. But the very first one is your mission statement. You can have another assessment. You should always assess yourself and have others come in and assess you. Make sure you're doing things right. And then you shoot for accreditation. For AAM accreditation, there's self-study. It provides insight and documentation. You have your peer reviews. That's a great thing about AAM compared to ASLH. AAM, you have the outside people coming in to review you and say what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. ASLH, you assess yourself. You work on your own pace, your own schedule. So I believe ASLH is actually the next one up. Services, including a mentoring program for accreditation preparation, is something AAM provides you. If you want to go through their accreditation program, they will guide you, almost like holding your hand step by step through the process. That continuum of excellence that I had up there on the screen, that's something that they created to help advance you through the accreditation process in a more streamlined manner. They make sure you have your core documents first. Once you have those documents out of the way, then it's how am I going to advance as a museum moving forward? And I have these documents to guide me along the way to do that. And then for museums to become members of AAM, they actually have a sliding scale based on your revenue. So membership for large organizations is more expensive than membership for small organizations. So as you look at your budget, you need to have a separate budget for your museum. It most likely will be a smaller budget than it is for your state society, and that will benefit you. Use that museum budget to become an AAM member. ASLH has a STEPS program. And STEPS, it stands for Standards and Excellence Program. It's a voluntary assessment program for the small to mid-sized museums It's focused because it's the American Association of State and Local Histories. It focuses more on history sites, so it's perfect for us as NSCDA properties. Like I said, it allows you to go and self-pace, it's self-study. They are there to help you. They give you a workbook. Once you start the process, you have an active enrollment status. What that means is, if you need help, they're there to help you. But they don't want to help you until you commit to becoming accredited through your program. You get national recognition. ASLH is a national organization. And by getting national recognition, it gives you that opportunity to go out to funding on a national level. That's something you must think about. You can't always go to your members for funding. Now, I know Karen's going to be speaking on fundraising a little bit later in this workshop, but it gives you the funding opportunities out there. They have lots of workshops that they provide and technical leaflets. They give you access to their website, which is a treasure trove. I mean, there's so much information up there for you. And then if you need something, if you're someone who gets excited, I got my certificate, they give you your certificate. And as a bonus, you get a little window decal you can stick on your museum window saying, we are AAM accredited. Or, I'm sorry, ASLH accredited. The STEPS program has online modules for you. So again, they walk you through it, but you're doing it at your own pace. You don't have to complete it all in 1 year. You can do it in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. It's what works best for you. If you are an all-volunteer organization, it's going to take you longer than if you have a staff of 20 or 50. And they understand that. They have a mentoring program out there. So if you get stuck, you're like, I need help. I don't know where to go from here. And they also have grants and scholarships available. And then there's, of course, the NSCDA accreditation. Now this is where, I apologize, I'm not Mamie. She heads up the program, so she could go on for hours and days telling you how enjoyable it is, what you can totally get out of it. And I'll tell you, this screen comes entirely straight from her. So it gives you, it looks at your governing authority, your governing board of museums. It looks at how you have your staff and your museum support, your membership, your security, your historic buildings and structures. Do you have something in place that tells you how to care for them? It covers your landscape and grounds and gardens. It covers your collections, interpretation, education. If you notice, a lot of these are the same things that we talked about. You know, I went through 7 focus points for accreditation. You can almost go down here and line them up, one for one on it. Interpretation, education, programs for the public. This is one of those aspects that's really important within the NSCDA accreditation. You must be able to show that you're reaching out to the public and making a difference in your community. And then also you have to be able to show that you have stable finances, your accounting is done in a proper manner, of course. The NSCDA legacy. In November 2000, the National Trust for Historic Preservation gave the NSCDA the Trustee Emeritus Award for Excellence in Stewardship of Historic Sites, and it says for acquiring, restoring, and interpreting a collection of historic properties that offer invaluable opportunities to experience the rich variety of America's heritage. Remember that. It is so important. This is a prestigious award that the NSCDA has received because of the difference that you've made since 1891. Carry that forward. Continue that tradition. Why should museums tackle accreditation? There's many reasons. But at the end, just do it. Because almost all the reasons are beneficial. They take time, they take energy, and yes, they take resources. But at the finish line, they benefit you. So when you have a museum, you combine the appropriate skills, a clear definition of job responsibilities, competitive pay, commitment to management and support, and strategic goals, you get a great staff and efficient board. If you don't have these things, it's that much harder to get through the accreditation, to succeed as a museum, to increase your visitorship, to increase your programs, and to increase your funding. So what do you do now? How can you help your favorite NSCDA museum get better? Find your strength and utilize it. And remember, nobody has all the strengths. If you're a type A personality and you believe you have all the strengths, I'm sorry, you're mistaken. But use your personality to go out there and find the people who do have the strengths in all the different areas that they're needed. And make them work with you. You can refer a group. Help the museum make new contacts. Introduce new donors. Or join a committee or task force if you're not already involved. And with that, I say thank you, and do you have any questions?
What for a small museum with, say, limited staff and mostly volunteer involvement, what accreditation would you recommend they go for first? What is the entry level accreditation?
NSCDA.
The question was, what is entry-level accreditation? I'm sorry, I should have mentioned this right before I asked for the question, but Karen will have a microphone coming around for any other questions. There is no direct one answer for that. I can say that I think the AAM accreditation is probably one of the hardest to get. So I would shoot for the NSCDA accreditation and the AASLH accreditation before I look to AAM. The earlier two I just said will help guide you through the AAM accreditation.
Now, what,
Yes.
part two, what degree of involvement or ownership does to get the NSCDA accreditation, is that open to all museums or only in, Dames properties?
Dames properties.
It's only Dames properties. NSCDA accreditation is only Dames properties. So, and one thing I did not say, once you get accredited, continue to strive and look forward. You can't rest on your laurels. You can lose your accreditation from all three of these organizations. So, with that, thank you.
So much, really appreciate it.